Hey guys, what is up? I have been wanting to try out what I would call like maybe the narco build, although I'm not actually sure who started it, the progenitor, if it was Nino or Narco. I know Fanboy or aka Sad Little Slug uses this build as well. And those guys have really kicked my ass a number of times with this build, and so I thought it'd be fun to try out. And I thought it would make sense to go ahead and create a build from scratch to try to optimize for this given setup. Traditionally, my builds are kind of a jack of all trades, and you can just kind of pretend you didn't see that part, but they're jack of all trades. But this was a very, very specific build that I made. As you can see, he's got a good amount of poise. I think without the Wolf Ring +3, he's rocking around 42 poise, something like that. Unfortunately, I don't really understand the poise breakpoints very well, so I'm not even sure what that means, but it does allow me to trade with a lot of people. I can often trade with greatswords, and I've learned that if you want to make a greatsword build, you can get away without having poise, but it sure makes it a lot more valuable if you have it. So really what I want to do in this video is just show off a number of fights that I had using this build. This is soul level 90. All the fights that you're going to see are soul level 90, and share some of the things that I learned about using this build. So this invasion here, this is actually a Discord event. Somebody from the Discord was dry fingered here, and we had a number of fights and invasions. I think I probably won like 2 of them, lost another 3 or 4. Anytime you're invading against people that are skilled like this, and there's 2 of them, it's a real tall order to try to survive. Having 2 people that can't hit each other under normal circumstances is difficult enough, but especially 2 people that are as skilled as these 2 guys were. And I don't remember the name of the players that were playing, but they're both really good, and this was a really fun event. This was actually early in my experiment with this setup, so I learned a lot of things after this that I didn't really understand at the time that I created this, but fortunately the things I did understand about invasions helped me to come out with a W here. And I think a couple of interesting things happened that I kind of want to show off. That was smart. And unfortunately there you can see there was no safe roll for me. I rolled the guy in front, the guy in behind grabbed me. They almost get me with the fire bombs. I felt like I didn't have time to really turn around and look over my shoulder. And you can see I threw out 1 R1 before I took the second Estus, and that was really more just to protect myself. I also have a bad habit of sometimes only hitting somebody 1 time with greatsword R1s when I really should be swinging twice, especially against good opponents. You can't afford to give away damage against good opponents. And there I think he rolled because he thought I was going to hit him with a rolling attack, and ended up getting roll caught as a consequence. GG guys. I'm assuming by now everybody has seen G9's Greatsword tutorial video. If you have not, I'll have a link to it in the description of the video. Definitely give that a look. So much wisdom about Greatsword. Most of you probably know G9, he's a tourney player, and he wins with the Greatsword, which a lot of people probably wouldn't have even thought possible. I certainly wouldn't have, but he's able to do it. And in part, he uses those charged R2s like you saw right there as a huge part of his strategy. Definitely give that video a view if you haven't already. You'll learn a lot, I guarantee it. Even if you don't play Greatsword, it'll help you understand what other people with Greatswords are trying to do to you. So when I filmed this particular clip, I had seen G9's video, but unfortunately I hadn't taken all the lessons to heart. And in fact, after I recorded this, I watched his video again and I realized that he advised against something that I do here. And that is against spellcasters using charged R2s at range to bait people because they can punish you at range. And you saw I just ate a Chaos Bed Vestiges as a consequence. Unfortunately, if I hadn't eaten that, I think I would have probably done all right in this fight. I mean, this is a tough build. I think this is like the typical sort of Revan 619 Pyro build, and it is not an easy build to face. This guy isn't using enough of the curved sword. He's playing a bit too passively, but you can see there, he finally catches me with the R1 and the into Black Flame, and that was it. So if I had followed his advice and not thrown out that charged R2 at range, which is safe against melee players to bait them in, but definitely not safe against casters, I probably would have won that fight. So one of the keys when you use this build is knowing when to go two-handed and when to go one-handed, meaning with the rapier in the offhand and the greatsword in the right hand. And the best advice that I can give you from what I've learned is against multiple people, usually you want a two-hand because you get the hyper armor. And the less skilled your opponents are, the more value there is in two-handing the weapon because of the poise. Hyper armor rather. But when you are against a skilled opponent, somebody who can space, somebody who can kind of know to stay outside your ability to hit them and space out your greatsword R1s and then hit you in between your hyper armor frames, those sorts of players, that's when you want to one-hand or at least do more one-handing, meaning use rapier and greatsword, because the whole advantage of the rapier is that you can hit somebody one time with the rapier and then leverage that into a greatsword R1, so kind of L1, R1. I don't do that often enough yet. I still don't have the muscle memory developed. I still too often go for two rapier R1s or L1s, and I really need to change that habit. I'm still not that great with this build. I'm not trying to show off somebody who's good with it. It's more my learning process, the things that I've figured out by using this build. But I'll tell you that Narco and Fanboy and Nino are still much, much better than I am with this build. Man, the charged R2s on this thing are just straight nasty. And there's a bunch of combos that you can leverage off of those charged R2s. So if you get a fully charged R2 two-handed on the Gales, that combos into the both weapon arts, which probably is a one-shot for most people. I know Narco one-shot me with that during one of, I think it was during one of my streams, or maybe it was during Pinko's. I don't remember for sure, but man, that sucked. In this situation, I probably should be one-handing the weapon because the other players probably got a lot more poise than me. You see we've got a phenomenal connection. The fact that I'm able to interrupt that player that late in the swing is a testament to the quality of the connection that we have. And funny enough, I seem to notice that at soul level 90, and there's that charged R2, that's so good. I seem to notice that the connections have been better at higher soul levels, presumably because the players there take the game more seriously. So here I find myself surprised by the host in very confined quarters against an ultra greatsword. This is really not a good environment for me. Now, fortunately, he wasn't pressuring me, so I was able to get away and heal. And he also wasn't minding his back very well either. But that rapier is so hard to reaction roll, and so especially for players that aren't accustomed to fighting against it, it's almost like free damage when you swing it. It's been a long time since I've seen somebody try to use the Dragon Tooth, and there what happened was he rolled in toward me, and I caught it early enough, and I was able to pivot around and backstab him. And that's a great way to learn how to get backstabs, when people roll in against you. And if you use something like a spear, people rolling into you is really, really common, and you can get a lot of practice with that sort of an approach. And here, obviously, I get invaded. I see him up above me, but I'm trying to pretend like I don't see him. And I screwed that up, man. I rolled into perfect position for a backstab. Like, his back was wide open. My timing was perfect. And I think I got a little too excited and I accidentally pressed the roll button a second time. There I came in pretty aggressively because I'm expecting the parry. And especially at these higher soul levels, you gotta be really careful looking for those run backstabs. They can just be a little dangerous because if he had swung a second time there, I would have been in big trouble. I decided to go ahead and heal here. It's an invasion. Guess it's kind of my prerogative as a host. Up till now, I haven't done very well, but now I'm going to start pressuring him more with the rapier. Although I'm still obviously being a little bit wary of that parry shield. That R2 too is really nice because it allows you to space in a way that people aren't expecting. They think they're out of range and that R2 suddenly shows them that they're wrong. He falls for the L1 waggle, but unfortunately I missed the roll catch there. I see the shield come out, I know immediately what's coming, the hail parry. GG, man. Good fight. I never used to invade the ring city. I never liked invading here for some reason, but because it's one of the few areas at higher levels that's still active, I'm finding myself invading here quite a bit. I think this guy's got the split leaf, which is a weapon that historically I've not done well at, and he's obviously got some decent poise on that build as well. Not enough, though. That is really nice, man. This is, like I said, my first real poise build, and it's worked out really well for me. I've really been enjoying it. It's really opened my eyes to the power of having a build with good poise. And you can see there, using both the L1 and R1, it always keeps the opponent guessing. If they think you're going to rapier and they roll and instead use the greatsword, they get roll caught. It's really nasty. The mind games are phenomenal. And this was one of my very first fights with the build. And you can see that in the beginning here, things do not go well for me. I think I'm probably trying to fish a little bit too much here, and that's part of the problem. Plus, he's latent. And the greatsword is slow. So again, I should probably be going one-handed here instead of trying to hit him with the greatsword, because the latency plus the extra time that the greatsword takes to swing is really a bad combo for me. And you can see here, I kind of get my shit together a little bit, and I'm not trying to fish him as much as I was. He backs off to heal, which for me is kind of the green light. And I know I could have healed at any time. It's just kind of fun to try to test myself and see if I can do it without healing. And here I think he's just trying to do sick, no-handed parries. Come on, man. It shows that he really didn't think much of me as an opponent, but then again, I'm not sure up until this point I've really given him a whole lot to respect. But that's going to change here in a moment. Man, that mix-up game with this weapon is so good. So good. And then on top of that, you get the parries. Now, in place of the rapier, you could elect to go for the S-stock, and instead then of the parries, you get the waggle, which could get people panic rolling, which I've actually tried a little bit, but I would really only prefer the S-stock over the rapier against like a really skilled opponent. Yeah, man, that rapier pressure is really something else, and I know from being on the other end of it, that is difficult to deal with. And as sort of a capstone here, I get to fight one of the popularizers of the build here, Sad Little Slug, aka Fanboy. We had about 8 fights. I just happened to capture the last 2, so these aren't necessarily representative of everything that happened. They just happen to be the last 2 fights. Now you'll notice this isn't truly the same build that I'm rocking. This is a mage that I'm playing with. Now the advantage of this build over the Gale's build is that I think it does a bit more damage because most people don't have very good magic defenses, but I don't have a poke. And the absence of a poke really hurts this build. And in fact, Sad Little Slug was able to do quite a bit of damage to me by spacing me out and hitting me with that Gale's R2, one-handed and two-handed. So I think, playing with this build, this iteration of it against Sad Little Slug, now part of it's just that he's so skilled, but part of it is also that my version of the build is just not as potent. And against most people, it's probably not going to really make a difference, but against somebody like this who's really good, it definitely does. Like, I definitely felt the absence of a good poke with the main hand weapon. Now, obviously, I've got like the weapon art, and I've got some spells that I can use if I want. And I screw around with the spells just a little bit, but I don't have any of the spell rings on, so they don't do that much damage. I suppose it's kind of a distraction. They could be somewhat valuable, and we both swung at each other with the rapier and somehow both missed. I have no idea how. I'm obviously in some trouble here. And there's that poke. Damn. GG, man. Thanks for showing up, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Bye now.